So hey gang, I can't actually see you, so I'm not really sure where to look, but a wave, any case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to Texas A&M. I started in 1990. I got my applied math degree in '93, and I went into the PhD program under Ray Carroll. I finished in '98, and I had a job waiting for me at Genentech. Um, So I moved out to the Bay Area at Genentech, and I was a non-clinical biostatistician for 2 years.
What is Genentech?
Hey,
What is
yeah,
Genentech? What type of work do they do?
sure. There's feedback from I guess your end. I don't know if you can mute until you ask questions or how that would work best, but
Okay, I'll turn my mic off. I'll turn my mic off
yeah,
and just
great.
turn it back on when it comes back.
Sure, and I'll explain more as I go along. So Genentech is a biopharmaceutical company. So it's just like one of the larger pharmaceutical companies that you would have heard of, but it's biotechnology. So all the drugs are protein-based rather than synthetic. Ray Carroll had one of his earliest PhD students was a director of biostatistics at Genentech, and so I got my foot in the door there. It's a great company. Biotechnology is a huge industry in California, and I know there's been a lot of folks from the stat program at A&M that went into the field. So I went out to the Bay Area here, and I was a non-clinical biostatistician, and that's basically applying statistics to drug development before it gets into clinical trials, so before it's tested on humans. So it's earlier on drug development. It was a fascinating area. I was part of Genentech for about 2 years. But during this time, I guess being out in the West Coast in California and specifically the Bay Area in the late 90s, I guess the burgeoning internet industry caught my eye, and it just felt like something that I wanted to try out, put my feet in the water and see if that industry was something of greater interest to me.
Where were you? Where were you from originally? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, sure, yeah. I was born in Bolivia originally. I grew up in New Orleans. I still have family in New Orleans, and I have some family in Texas too. I'm actually one of 15 people in my family, I think, that have been to Texas A&M. So it's kind of a family tradition. And it just so happened that I really fell in love with statistics in high school, and Texas A&M has one of the best applied statistics programs in the nation. So it worked out perfectly for me. So I switched to the internet world around 2000, and you're probably all too young to remember, but 2000 was widely recognized as the year that the first .com bubble burst. So I moved to this smaller division of a larger company called Macromedia, but within 6 months, almost everyone was let go of their job. So the timing wasn't the best to switch industries, but I did fall in love with technology. So I stuck with it. I rode, I guess, the roller coaster ride of the early internet world in the Bay Area, where there were startups that zoomed to be a very successful company and then just collapsed under their own weight and lack of business model. I was involved in companies in analytics in the technology industry, many different companies in many different areas. So I was at Macromedia for a while. Then I moved to one of the first web analytics companies that really that provided tools to analyze traffic on your website. This was before mobile, of course. It was a company called Core Metrics, which is now part of IBM, actually. From there, I moved to a company called LookSmart, which had a search engine that was a competitor with Google back in the early 2000s. The differentiator was LookSmart had human editors. So if you can imagine that, you had a search engine company competing with Google in quality, but it wasn't completely algorithmic based. It was we had editors making sure we had the right search results for some of the most important queries.
Wow.
Yeah, and then after that, I was there for 2 or 3 years, Google started dominating and most of the other search engines outside of Microsoft petered out. So I moved to a division of eBay called shopping.com, which really doesn't exist anymore as a standalone division. And that's basically search engines, a commercial search engine for commerce. So you can look for things that you would want to buy online. I was there for 5 years, leading up the business intelligence group, which business intelligence is basically analytics applied to how well the business is running. So it's a combination of finance, marketing, sales, a little bit of engineering. I was there for 5 years, and then at that point in my life, I wanted to go back into a startup environment. So I joined a company that doesn't exist anymore, but it was designed to, you created applications for Facebook, and it was designed to get people to use the application, but in the process, we found out a lot of consumers' information, and we used that for marketing purposes. It's a company that was actually bought by Facebook down the line, although I wasn't there when the company was bought. I eventually made it to Facebook about 3 years ago, and just to lead up the analytics for consumer marketing. And just a background on that, Facebook has been around for over 13 years, and it's been growing at a tremendous rate. But for the first 10 or so years, there was no formal marketing organization that focused on consumers. And marketing really is, at the end of the day, it's really just a bridge between the consumer and the product. And it's incorporating the voice of the consumer and the consumer's concerns into building products. And it's also messaging to consumers on a regular basis about why the product is important to them. And there was no formal marketing organization. The executives here, Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and others, felt that we were growing well, our consumer base kept expanding, and we'd rather just devote our resources to product and engineering. But over time, it became clear as Facebook became more of a dominant social platform that every time we changed our products, that every time we had a policy change or updates to some of our features, there was this natural inclination for consumers to not trust our motivations. And why should they when we're not actually actively communicating with them? So the decision was made to start a formal marketing organization that would have regular communication with consumers, typically in the form of advertising, but we also develop products ourselves. We developed the team in earnest. I was brought in as the first analyst to build a practice for marketing, and I've been here since there for the past 3 years. There's two major areas of marketing, I guess, at least in our organization. You can think of product marketing versus brand marketing. Product marketing is really focused on specific products and features and educating and inspiring consumers to let them know why they would want to use it, using their feedback to help inform the development of future products, etc. Brand marketing is more around specific audience segments. So how do we build products, or how do we communicate to teenagers, for instance, or Germany, right? And we do a lot. Facebook has a lot of marketing both on the product and the brand side, and typically it's a combination of the two. Our marketing is global in scope, but each country has its own concerns, so we have to focus on a country at a time, typically when we develop our marketing programs. I'm going to give you a flavor of some of the work that we do at marketing here in general. So you probably are all familiar with Facebook Live. It's a new product, or it's been out for about a year, and it gives you the ability to broadcast live on Facebook. So whereas 5 years ago even, in order to have a live broadcast, you'd have to have vans and connection to a satellite. It was a large production. Now, when you broadcast, all you need is your phone, right? So this is a sea change in the way that anyone can communicate. And it's changing the world. It's pretty much revolutionizing our ability to get messages out or communicate something that's going on around the world instantly. But the product is new. And, of course, Facebook wants the usage of broadcasting live to be something that all consumers would want to do, not just the newscasters, or not just people who are citizen journalists who are in the middle of an uprising, or not even just for weddings or something momentous. We want it to be more like help establish the social norm about broadcasting as a thing to do, and just communicating with your friends or family or whatnot. So about a year ago, marketing, we established a cross-functional team where we had analytics involved with market research, with brand strategy, with some people in our creative team, and we got together, and first question we wanted to know is like, who's actually broadcasting live now, right? Like, who would want to use this product and why, and who is not using the product, and what are some of the barriers to using a live broadcasting tool? Well, it turns out, of course, that, as you may imagine, one of the biggest barriers is it's nerve-wracking, because as soon as you broadcast, it goes out immediately. You don't have a chance to redo whatever it is that you're broadcasting. So that's a big emotional barrier to get over. It's also, consumers just didn't really, and still to this day, they don't necessarily have like a complete understanding of when it might make sense to broadcast live or not. Mm-hmm. And so we undertook a program where we researched, we interviewed and went to created focus groups around the world in different markets to understand who's using why, what's some of the feedback from consumers directly about when they would want to watch live broadcast versus actually broadcast live themselves. We used Facebook as a platform. Like we ran some ads, some very primitive ads to see if what we're talking about resonated with consumers. And over the course of a year, we built out a large marketing program that manifested itself in Q4 of last year. We had in the UK and in the US, we had a very large integrated marketing campaign, and by integrated I mean across many different channels. We had ads on Facebook itself. We had television ads, depending in certain markets. I'm not sure if there were any in Texas. I think there might have been in Houston or Dallas. We had out-of-home ads like billboards and whatnot. And the idea was, can we help increase awareness in consumers' mind that broadcasting live is a thing, that you can communicate that way, just like if you would ever consider posting a photo on Facebook, maybe those people would also consider broadcasting live. So we wanted to make sure that people understood this is a new form of communication, that Facebook is the best place to do it because you have the largest audience, and we have the best tools. So category leadership, Facebook is the leader in the area. And then, of course, we wanted to actually get people to start using it, and not just for, like I said, not just for weddings or other big events, but just for everyday moments. And so that campaign actually just ended recently, a month ago, and we're wrapping up the analysis right now. And the idea is we're going to see what worked, what didn't work, what messages resonated with consumers. Did television work better than digital ads, like on Facebook or like on YouTube and whatnot? And we'll apply those learnings to future campaigns. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about that?
Yeah.
That's just an example of the type of work that we do. It's thematic in nature. It's not necessarily the type of analytics we do, and I can get into that as well.
Okay. I had a question about those ads that you put out. How do you decide what wording to use, for example? You want to collect this type of information. Who's using this stuff, and what are the barriers? There's an infinite number of ways to do that. What words do you use? How long should it be? Is it a web ad? Is it a billboard?
Yeah. So those are great questions, and that comes into like where the analyst and the market researcher, I guess we work very closely together, drive the program. So you can think about, we do a lot of testing, right? And this is where the need for the experience in experimental design is crucial in in the industry. And we can talk about that later in terms of like things to focus on in terms of like your education and then the type of experience that makes sense. But when we advertise on Facebook or do anything on Facebook, we have infinite control, like of who gets to see what, who doesn't. So we can set up experiments in a traditional sense, where you have, like, we can expose a set of users to an ad, and another set of users that, you know, just randomly split in two, that they don't receive the ad, and then we can understand, like, what the differences are. Like, do the people who see an ad, are they more likely to broadcast live using Facebook, and by how much? And then we can start using these experiments to understand which messages work better. You know, even like which colors in an ad would work better. Yeah. But it's more about, like, the experimentation we do is at a higher level. We can build upon, like, past learnings that we know certain colors work better. We don't necessarily have to test that every single time. We have, like, a set of best practices built upon past tests. But specific for live, we did a lot of market research, and that's kind of like inbound testing. We generated hypotheses about how we should talk about live and what's, like, the most important messaging to use in our ad campaigns. And in this particular case, we landed on two potential messages that resonated with consumers. One is this idea of, if you broadcast live, you're really being unfiltered, and it's more of an honest broadcast. And one of the reasons why this is important is because the younger generation, at least now, they are not, traditional advertising doesn't work well with the younger generation as much as it had in the past. Whereas before, you wanted to have a really polished commercial to make it seem honest and sincere. Now what works better is something that's kind of raw, that it doesn't look like it was overproduced and insincere. And so teenagers and, you know, young adults, this idea of being unfiltered, and having this, you know, if you were thinking about music, it's like a garage band, right? Like something that sounds more honest and not overly produced. This resonates a lot better with consumers, and so that was one message, like, hey, share something in an unfiltered way. On the other hand, this idea of sharing things immediately in the moment also had resonated well with consumers. And so that was like a fork in the road early on, like, how should we build our campaign? Is it talking about how it's honest and open and sincere? Or should we be talking about a form of communication that's more about broadcasting things in the moment to share things with your loved ones in real time? And we in the markets where we wound up having our large campaign in the US and the UK, the latter held true. It was more about sharing things in the moment. In markets, in other markets where we wound up not having this a large campaign, at least initially, for instance, Brazil, it was more about being unfiltered and raw and honest and sincere. So there was a lot of, the market research and talking to people in focus groups helped generate some of these ideas around what positions to use in our campaign. And then the analysts would come in and do some rudimentary testing using Facebook as a platform, because we can control it and we can set up experiments as we see fit, helped pinpoint the optimal message. And then we had the creative team come in and build out assets or ads that were, like, on brand and that fit in the positioning and the messaging that we determined were best. So in this particular case, having a really strong grasp of experimental design is key. That was just in testing, but now when we run the campaign, say, like, if you want to know what was the impact of this large campaign that we had in the US, let's say on Facebook, like the ads that we had on Facebook, again, we can control that. So we can have a holdout group versus a treatment group, and we can see what the lifts are in terms of broadcasts or sentiment. We use surveys to help measure, like, how people feel about the campaign. But, like, and with certain other channels, for instance, television, it's too expensive to buy ads one market at a time. So it's really hard to have a control group. So in those cases, we have, like, holdout markets. So we run an ad campaign nationally in the US, and maybe we'll compare that to, say, Canada, and where we don't have ads, and see, like, over time, does the usage of live increase at a faster rate than it does in Canada? And then we can use that understanding to help pinpoint like what are the causal effects of advertising on TV. Typically, it's not so neat. There's a combination of like a control and a holdout on using on Facebook ads versus geographic-based holdouts. When you have television ads, and then you have to worry about out-of-home ads, where you can't have billboards in every market in the country. So you have certain markets where you have billboards and certain controlled markets where you don't, and then you have to understand like, well, how do I know which markets to have, like which markets should I have billboard ads and which ones I don't. That's when it comes down to like, well, you have to find markets that are similar to each other and do like match pairs. So there's a lot of blocking involved. You know, it's over time when you think about like advances in data science. You think about some of the more sexier technologies like machine learning and neural networks. But at the end of the day, in my experience, if an analyst doesn't have a really sound grasp of experimental design and some of more of these formal statistical techniques, they're not going to do as well. And this is definitely a case, like this live campaign that I'm talking about, where we had to be very creative with how we set up our experimentation to get the most amount of information out to make our decisions on where to spend our money with as much confidence as possible.
Okay, thanks. The students here will, I think, for the most part, have not seen much experimental design yet, but they will. There's a class in the curriculum that's required. It's basically an undergraduate version of Mike Longnecker's 642.
Awesome.
So I think they would be comfortable with the idea from what they've seen already that you want a control group versus an experimental or treatment group.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what kinds of, you mentioned blocking and match pairs, what kinds of designs do you guys use?
So I just want to preface this with experimental design is like, for what I remember when I was in school, it was the ultimate case where you have this mathematical discipline, statistics. It was the ultimate case of formalizing what really makes intuitive sense to a lot of people. If I want to compare, let's just say if I want to run an ad an ad campaign in the U.S. and I want to see if maybe it had an impact in the U.S. and then I say, well, let's compare it to another market, and I were to suggest, well, why don't we run it, use a control market of India, right? Like, probably the entire class, everyone in the class right now would say that's not really fair to compare the U.S. to India because there's so many differences. Mm-hmm. They're just not, they're not the same culture. You know, they're different sizes. They're different parts of the world. It doesn't make sense. And experimental design basically takes what is like a really strong intuitive understanding and formalizes it and makes it very rigorous. Of course, it makes sense to find two experimental units that are similar in nature. And you try and control for all these other factors that may impact your analysis. And that's at the crux of experimental design. And I remember taking these courses. I actually took a couple as an undergraduate, and they were fascinating to me because it really helps you, all of a sudden, instead of just looking at just data that exists in the world, it helps you create a setup where you can come up with like a cause and effect. And it's just so important. And it, you know, if you have a strong bearing in experimental design, it'll take you really far in industry. In terms of the types of experimental design we do, the easiest ones, and because if you're in the tech industry, you have typically a lot of data, the easiest ones are very simple, like comparing two populations. Just straight up, like if you imagine like a t-test or something like that. Similar in nature to that, potentially a little messier. There's always messy data. But we can get down, we can typically, I mean, we often go to like multifactorial designs as well, where you have lots of different combinations of different factors, and you may have the ability to set up a design, an experiment using a ton of factors at one time. Typically, though, part of getting your work to resonate within a company is being able to explain it and easily and make sure other people can interpret the results as well. So there's typically we kind of err on being less sophisticated with our designs than more sophisticated, and the idea is if you do an analysis and you investigate some process and you have really great insights, and even if you know what you're doing is right, if you can't get buy-in from the rest of the company and to actually take action on your insights, then you're not really creating any impact. And if you're not creating any impact, then what's the point of having done the analysis to begin with? Mm-hmm. Like, what we want to do as an analyst is not only stress about the details and make sure we have the right approach and that we have some really great conclusions, but an analyst is really the person who can take all this quantitative information and help advance a program or change the direction of a company. And if you're not getting that, then ultimately the most important part of the job isn't being done. It's tough. There's a lot of one other thing I want to say is there's nothing, especially coming out into industry as an undergraduate, there's no one course that's going to make or break your career. It's all about experience. You can have a PhD in statistics and you go into industry and you're in your first or second year and you just don't have the experience and the muscle memory to identify like certain patterns that you see in the real world and understand like how to interact not only with the data but interact with other groups and how to advance the agenda. Or you can have an undergraduate degree and have like 5 or 6 years of experience and you're in industry and you're in a much better place to help push the company forward. Experience is key. I can't stress that enough. The education is amazing, and the education I got at A&M was fantastic. But it takes time. No matter what level of degree you have, it's going to take time to build up the experience, especially in industry where it's not like as straightforward a path to advance your career. It's not like, okay, I need to make sure that I publish or I do enough research and whatnot. It's like you have to kind of make your own path, and it requires experience. There's really just no way around that. But the good news is that you're going to have the right training coming out of the program there.
Yeah. All right. Let me step back a second here and open it up to students. Taylor, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk more. You said that you guys did experiments with Facebook for figuring out how to best market live broadcasting. Could you go into more detail about that?
He was asking for a little more detail on the examples of experiments that you did when specifically evaluating Facebook Live.
Yeah. So I guess the process is, this is a process. It doesn't always happen this way, but the idea is like for live, like we don't know who's using live. Like, are there certain groups of people, and why they're using live, and what's preventing them from using live? So we can mine the data that we do have for the early adopters, the people who are already using live, and seeing like, are there certain demographics, right? Like, is it mostly teenagers, or is it older folks? What country? Maybe some information like about like what other interests they have. We're Facebook, so I know people who are broadcasting live on Facebook. I can also see like what pages they follow and things like that. So we can build up profiles about people who are using live. And then if we want to understand them, we go about different markets, different countries, and we interview them. We go to focus groups and we ask them, questions about why they're using live. And then conversely, we may also talk to groups of people who we determine just aren't using the functionality at all. And we ask them, like, what's working and what's not working. And we build up like this pool of hypotheses about why people aren't using it and what would it take to get people to use it, right? So we generate a bunch of hypotheses. Then the next step is, because it's easy for us. We control Facebook, the platform. We can advertise Facebook. We have Facebook ads on Facebook. Right? It's a great place to be in because we can control a lot of who sees what. And so in a particular case with Live, I actually just did, like in the US, we created a very like low budget ad that just had, I think in this case, it was like people hiking in the Grand Canyon. It was like stock footage. It had nothing to do really with Live. And it was like a little video, and at the top of the video, it basically said, use something about using Facebook Live to share something in the moment. And then another version of the ad was like, use Facebook Live to be unfiltered, and sincere or whatnot. Like these two statements that we thought resonated the most in focus groups. And we ran the ads, and we had holdout groups, and we ran them against different populations and whatnot. And in both the holdout groups and in the treatment groups, we fielded surveys, again, on Facebook. And the surveys were like, how likely are you to use Facebook Live? Or have you heard about Facebook Live? Or how do you feel about, what's your opinion of Facebook just in general? We just asked the same survey questions to people in both groups, in all groups. And that was like a lot of our outcome metrics. And so we could tell which positioning statement worked best in terms of like elevating maybe the consideration to use Live, which groups, like was it teenagers, was it like different countries, did the position statements work better? And so we ran the really very simple ads to get an idea of to help set our course, take a smart step forward. Which positions are working better, which audience does it work best with, and that helped. It was an iterative process, right? So we get a little bit more information, and then we refine our ads, and then we keep stepping forward a little bit more. And over the course of many months, we build out a better understanding of the right types of ads to run, the right audiences to run against. And we don't just run ads, too. We also have the ability, because we're testing on Facebook. If you're on Facebook a lot, sometimes you'll see at the very top of your news feed when you log in, you might see like a little notification, right? And it could be like, now you might see something about like, hi, welcome to Facebook, here's the weather for the day. Sometimes it might be like, happy 4th of July or something. It's not really an ad, it's just a unit in the Facebook news feed. We can also use those units too, and like basically say, hey, we have this thing called Facebook Live that you can use to share things in the moment. Or we have this thing called Facebook Live that you can use to be unfiltered and real, like sincere. Mm-hmm. And we can see which messaging works better there. So the fact that we're advertising Facebook, and we can use the Facebook platform as a test bed, makes our ability to iterate on ideal marketing programs pretty fast. Other companies don't have that luxury. If you can imagine, like if I were, I don't know, Geico, mm-hmm. right? Like you can advertise on Facebook, sure, but you can't control things as into the exact detail that Facebook advertising on Facebook could. Mm-hmm. You can advertise on television too, but television is really expensive. And so typically you would want to advertise, you want to build out your test campaigns on a platform that's much less expensive, so you can get your learnings in place. And then once you're pretty sure about this is a great ad campaign, then you can go buy the expensive media, like on television, or even things that we've done before is like buying ads before a movie, like pre-trailers at the movie theater. But we have the luxury at Facebook of being able to test our ads in a very inexpensive place on our own platform, where we really don't have to pay for it. The only thing we have to worry about is we're getting in the way of other advertisers. Yeah. But it's a really inexpensive place to iterate.
Okay. So just to spell out what you were describing there in full detail, you might have, so somebody logs onto Facebook and they were, I presume, randomly selected to either be in the holdout group that you described, in which case they don't see the ad at all. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
that's right.
Other people log in and they were randomly selected to see the ad that emphasizes the sincerity element. Other people log
That's right.
in and they see the other flavor of the ad. And then for each of those
That's right.
people, you solicit survey responses.
That's right.
You know, what's your...
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we it's a combination of two. We definitely survey a lot in marketing, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But we also look at behavioral data, like how people would wind up using Facebook. Here's the difference. In traditional data science, like most of data science started on the product side, where you're like iterating on products and testing products, and like if you're on a website, like what font works better on my website? Is it red or is it blue? And that is, I guess the bottom line is that we're really interested in what people do, right? In marketing, we're more interested in what people think. And in data science applied to the product side, it's great to have like a black box, like a machine learning algorithm or some neural net or something like that just helps you predict which version of a website works better. Mm-hmm. And then once you have the right version, you turn it on, or right product, that's the new product, and it's indefinitely there. And it works, and you've optimized your site, great. You can't have that. You don't have the luxury to do that in marketing. You can't decide which ad campaign works best and then run the same ad campaign forever, right? You can only run an ad campaign for a limited amount of time, typically like a few weeks to a few months. You have to really understand not just what worked, but why it worked. You have to really care. You have to really understand like why a certain ad campaign resonated with consumers, and then you synthesize those learnings and you use those learnings for future campaigns. Marketing is ephemeral. The actual communication needs to change constantly, because you're talking to consumers, and you can't say the same thing over and over again. But you need to understand like what is resonating in the mind of the consumer and apply that to future campaigns. So in order to understand why not only what people are doing, but why they're doing it, we have to supplement like this behavioral data, like, like time on site or repeat visitation to the website. We also need to understand why they're doing it. So survey work is really important in marketing, just to get at to peel the layers of the onion, so to speak, and really understand what's motivating the consumer to do what they're doing. So with almost everything that we do, we have two components. And this is just in general, but like in marketing, like, are we increasing usage of our product? In this case, are people using Facebook or certain components of Facebook more? That's easy to measure. And the other one is more about like, what is a consumer's overall satisfaction with Facebook, or do they trust us? That's harder to measure because that requires survey work. And so we pair the two together to help us determine whether or not our marketing programs are succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask one quick question, and then I'll ask students what questions they have. On the topic of collecting these data, whether it's a survey or what, kind of a fundamental aspect of doing that is ensuring that you get representative samples, basically, that the people who respond to your questions represent the greater group. And there's all kinds of ways that could fall apart. The most, I don't know, the people who are likely to respond are people who tend to have the most critical, or something like that. There could be some biases. Do you guys have thoughts on that, or strategies for ensuring that, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So it's absolutely true. At the end of the day, people who answer surveys are weird, for lack of better phrasing. They're not like a typical consumer. Most consumers just can't be bothered. Yeah. So there's a few things about that. They're definitely not necessarily representative of the target population. Typically, the more active you are, because we ask people to take surveys on Facebook itself, the survey respondents are typically more weighted to the more engaged set of consumers. because you're not going to see the link to take a survey unless you're on Facebook. The more you're on Facebook, the more likely you are to see the link. So it's weighted towards like more people who show up on Facebook more days out of the month, etc. So we're cognizant of that fact. We're also cognizant of the fact that a lot of times people who take surveys either really want to provide really strong positive feedback or strong negative feedback. So a lot of times it tends to be bimodal. You know, like a lot of times you're just mad at Facebook and you're looking for a way to send them feedback. If we had on Facebook, if we had a static link that was always there saying you can click here and send us feedback, that type of feedback is typically it's extreme. It's either they love us or they hate us. Mm-hmm. But we only ask people periodically. It just pops up every once in a while. So there's less of this bimodal response about loving and hating because it's more opportunistic. You just don't see it all the time, the link for the survey. But it is weighted in a way that it's like people who are more engaged typically answer surveys. So we go back and reweight essentially. There's two ways you can do it. You can stratify your surveys. You can basically only, you can look at who's responding to surveys, and if you realize some of the lesser engaged folks are underrepresented, then you could start only putting links to take the survey to the underrepresented groups. Mm-hmm. Or you can get all your survey responses, and then you can reweight it, saying, okay, we have a lot of survey responses from, let's say, it's more heavily weighted towards females than males than our typical population. Let's reweight the responses so it reflects the actual true gender composition. And we do both. At the end of the day, though, like there's always going to be bias that you can't account for. And so what I'm less concerned, like if we're measuring what's our overall satisfaction score, let's say how satisfied are you with Facebook, I'm less concerned with the absolute score than the comparison between, say, the treatment group and the holdout group, mm-hmm. or the score over time. Is it trending upwards or downwards? Even with some bias that we can't account for in the data, the trends are still meaningful, and the comparisons between two groups are meaningful, because if you set up the groups in the same way, so they're just two random groups, the comparison still has a lot of meaning. But it's definitely something that we're very cognizant about, and we try our best to make sure we eliminate as much of the bias as possible.
Mm-hmm. FYI, for our stat majors, there's a class, Stat 407, that is all about surveys. So it is a discipline kind of in and of itself. How do you solicit information from people, and how do you word things? Do you use quantitative responses or categorical or ordinal or what? And the weighting that he was talking about to accommodate different relative importance of different subpopulations and stuff like that. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I did not take that course, nor did I take any survey related course. And going into marketing, I really wish that I had. Now, you do learn it on the job if you're going to go into marketing and you're going to be involved in it, but just having that like formal training to recognize certain situations and have like in the back of your mind, at least, not if you already know how to apply it automatically, but at least know where to go look to find out how you could work in a certain scenario. Yeah. That's key. So if marketing at all is of interest to you, the survey coursework is key.
Okay, cool. What questions do you all have? Taylor, go ahead.
I was wondering what advice you'd have to an undergraduate student who wanted to go into a career path similar to yours.
So advice for an undergraduate student who's interested in a career path like yours. Graduate school, not graduate school, internship.
Yeah, so you answered for me just now. Like I said before, experience is key.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, I'm just going to say, well, obviously, graduate degrees are a great way to get your foot in the door. Even if you're in industry and you don't necessarily need that level of training, because you don't necessarily need that. You could probably survive with an undergraduate degree in a lot of these areas because you learn on the job. But to get your foot in the door and just to have like a leg up, I think if you can find ways to do an internship, not only do you network while you're interning, and you develop connections that you can leverage later, but you also build up like what I call muscle memory, like this real world experience that will help you not only get your foot in the door, but will help you early on in your career. It'll give you a lot of confidence, and it'll also maybe help you pick a path. Like if you intern in a certain area that you might be interested in, maybe that's not the right area, or maybe you're not sure, but you take an internship and all of a sudden you realize you like the industry that you've interned in. So I would suggest internships if at all possible. It does make a difference when my team. We don't recruit people straight out of school like we look for experience, but there is a huge program at Facebook that recruits people right out of college, and internships make a big difference. Like that definitely increases the visibility of an applicant if they have some meaningful internships under the belt.
Okay. Do you have any advice for finding internship opportunities with tech companies, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, are those types of things like advertised on websites, or do you have to know somebody, or what?
So knowing somebody is definitely helpful. It's always better to know someone than to not know someone. If you go to some of the larger, identify the industry that you think is interesting to you, and if you go to some of the larger companies, if you go to like Google's career page or Facebook's career page, Apple, Amazon, any of these big internet companies, they have, you can find out information about internship programs. We have strong internship programs at Facebook across many different disciplines, but so do all these larger companies. The smaller companies are probably harder to get connected to, but I would definitely put some work and some research into exploring some of the larger companies. And an internship, say, as a statistician or an analyst at Facebook or at Google, it's across many different disciplines. There's analysts everywhere. Our IT has analysts, there's product analytics, there's marketing analytics. We actually have a group at Facebook called Core Data Science, and it's comprised of, in large part, of people who were in academia, of professors and whatnot, and they do basically their own independent research upstream of how it could be applied directly to a product. And a lot of these larger companies have like these research groups too. So if you're more academic minded, over time you could even explore internships there. Even human resources, finance, policy, everybody has analytics groups in these larger companies. And so the discipline you're in right now is going to open up so many doors in any different area of industry that you can imagine. But I would definitely spend some time identifying the companies and the industries that you care about, and then like researching which ones of them have undergraduate internship programs.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Other questions? How many statisticians or data scientists are in the group that you're a part of?
I manage a team of 15 folks or so. There's another group. I run analytics for product marketing, and then there's analytics for brand marketing. That's another group of like 6 or 7 people. We're probably going to double by the end of the year. Everyone has quantitative experience, like formal degrees in some quantitative field. Statistics is definitely one of them. There's a 2 or 3 that are like have master's degrees. There's a couple, including myself, that have PhDs in statistics. We also have other quantitative fields that are represented that you may imagine works with marketing, and that's like sociology and psychology, some of the behavioral sciences, and that's a great discipline that incorporates kind of like your quantitative side, but also like this natural, innate curiosity about what makes people tick, and that combination is a pretty strong indicator that marketing is a great field to be in. But overall, there's probably, I think on the product analytics side, so product analytics is our largest group of analysts at Facebook.
Yeah.
There's probably like 300 plus analysts. And then we have another group that supports analytics that supports our advertisers. There's about 3 million advertisers on Facebook, and there's a lot of analytics that goes into supporting them to making sure that they have the best possible ads on our platform. There's probably a group of 100 or so analysts supporting them. And then each other area has groups of analysts too. So we're looking at between 500 and 1,000 analysts at Facebook out of maybe 15,000 people in total.
Wow. Okay. Jose?
You said you started off doing pharmaceutical statistics, right?
Yes.
I was just wondering how your experience was and what made you transition into the tech industry.
How was your experience in pharmaceutical, and what made you transition to tech?
Yeah, so I can only speak for my experience at Genentech, which, by the way, I look back at that as fondly. It's one of the best cultures of any company that I've been in. They treat their employees amazingly. I was there for 2 years, and really, it was a combination of a push and a pull. I had a lot of friends and other people that I knew in the Bay Area that moved to the Bay Area for the technology industry, and that always had a certain appeal to me. So that I was being pulled, but also in the pharmaceutical industry, I looked around and I realized I was thinking about my 5-year path, where I would be, and it dawned on me that as a biostatistician, 5 years from where I would be a biostatistician. I'd be maybe a higher level biostatistician or maybe a manager, but it felt to me that my upside there was always going to be kind of supporting the company from the stat perspective, right? I'm supporting the development of the drug development process. Whereas in the technology industry, I looked at some of my colleagues, some people who had the same background, and they were actually leading companies. They were on the executive team, they were the head of product, they were the head of strategy. I think it was much easier to see myself at that time moving higher up in a company on the technology side than in the biostatistics side. And I definitely have an entrepreneurial streak to me, and that appeals to me greatly. And over time, I did. I was the head of product at a small company before too, and it was just relying on my background in analytics that helped me to get to that level. And that's something that I probably could not have done in a biotech company. So that's kind of the push reason, is I felt like I really wanted to get to a point where I was making more executive decisions. Now, come full circle, I'm not necessarily that at Facebook, and the area that I focus on is analytics. It's not product strategy or anything, but I have a ton of experience in a lot of different areas and a lot of different verticals that I think helped me become not only a better analyst, but a better manager of analysts where I am now.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of managing, I'm curious, how has that been for you? I mean, in a statistics curriculum, for example, we don't have any management classes, and that's kind of intimidating to, at least to me, to think that not only am I responsible for my statistical, skills and everything, but now I've got people working for me, and I got to delegate things and manage timelines and all of that.
It's something that you grow into. I have never taken any courses or anything like that in management. I just had a lot of experience as an analyst over the past 20 years. And over time, that experience, you think, you realize that you can serve as a mentor for other analysts. Like the background that I have, what I've been through, I'm a strong analyst, just given the years that I've been in the area, that I can help more junior folks out. And then over time, you realize that I realized that I like it. I enjoy it. I liked teaching when I was in graduate school. Not necessarily that that's the same, but it's just like seeing other people, helping other people out. So I think a lot of management is that. I'm at a point now, though, where my team is, in many ways, every individual on my team is stronger than I am at something in what we do. So I can't be like the expert that shows a junior analyst like how to do specific work, because they're better at it than I am. Now a lot of it is more like mentorship and making sure like I'm a sounding board for career guidance. But yeah, you have to delegate. Like it's more like being a conductor in an orchestra than actually playing the instruments. Yeah. And that's just something that you can easily go into if you're an analyst and you have years under your belt. There's always need for strong managers to help lead an analytics function, but you don't have to. Like there's analysts that I know that have as many years of experience as I do, and they're still like an individual contributor because that's what they feel more comfortable. We have, as a statistician, as an analyst, as a data scientist, we have that luxury. We're in demand across many industries, and you can kind of set your career path. You can either go into like just being a strong individual contributor, or you can go into management if that's something that you feel like that interests you over time.
Cool. Other questions, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about the difference between product analytics and brand analytics, and like more what kind of personality types of a person would be attracted to which side of things?
Yeah. So I usually when I talk about the differences, I talk about it from being pro marketing, but that's not necessarily the case. Because I've been on both sides. Again, to me, like a lot of the product side is you're much more, even though you might, for instance, at Facebook, you might be dealing with like how consumers use Facebook, behavioral metrics. You're a little bit more abstracted away from the consumer. You're interested more in like, for lack of better phrasing, the machine, like how people are using your product. You think about the product and like what can I do to make people use the product. In marketing, it's more about like consumer first. It's like, okay, this is a consumer need that Facebook is not addressing or maybe not educating them. Let's find the right product, the right messaging, the right use cases, and talk to the consumers. So it's like finding the right products that fit the consumer, as opposed to finding ways for consumers to use the products more. It's a subtle nuance. On marketing, again, we're more concerned with the message, not the product itself. We're more concerned with what people think, not what people do. And because of that, a lot of the data that we work with is squishier, I guess, like softer data from surveys or from panels, from focus groups. And a lot of it is, requires much more direct interaction with consumers themselves, as opposed to maybe like being like at your workstation, like completely separated away from the human interaction. And as an example, like I go to focus groups a lot. I go probably every month. I was just in Brazil for some focus groups trying to understand usage of some of our products and talking to consumers directly. I don't have a market research background, but it's really, I guess it gives you a sense of grounding to understand, like, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, how people are thinking about your product, as opposed to just looking at the data. So there's like this innate curiosity and interest in really understanding the human condition more than just like refining the product. Again, that's why there's a lot of behavioral scientists that are in marketing, because they actually really fundamentally are curious about why people do what they do. In terms of like the actual analytics that's involved, outside of like in one case there's more survey work than the other, they're very similar in nature. It's just really like, what's your starting point? Is your starting point a product, or is your starting point a person's mind?
Other questions? You've been quiet, Emma. You usually have questions. What kind of software do you use when you're working with data and programming languages?
Yeah, so it's imperative to have a lot of experience dealing with large data sets. So there's a lot of SQL or kind of database manipulation languages that we use, just standard. Like you have to be really strong in that. In terms of like languages that we use a lot, Python is prevalent everywhere. I guess some of the variants like Julia and whatnot. R is like the de facto statistical language. It's open source, but everyone uses it. You can borrow. There's tons of different libraries that you can work off of. If you're on the web side, like understanding PHP or using PHP is important. But really, I think having a strong grasp, if you had to pick two languages, would be outside of SQL. SQL you just have to know almost anywhere. Outside of that would be Python and R are like the de facto languages that are used in industry these days.
Yeah, okay. Everybody will see R quite a bit throughout their studies, and I'm teaching a class for the first time this semester where we're using Python and SQL some. So we're trying to get them some exposure to that stuff, yeah.
You have the right ones then.
Okay, cool. All right, any other questions? Go ahead, Emma.
Do you use C++ that much in industry, or is that more of an academic language?
Yeah, what about C++?
I think if you're on the engineering side, like if you go into maybe like a data engineering career, that language is a little bit too low level. Like typically there's other applications that make it easier to do analysis. Yeah. But yeah, C++ is definitely, as an engineer, you're incredibly employable having that background. As a data scientist, it's probably not as important. I've taken a C++ course as an undergraduate, and I've never used it since. So.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask one last question. What do you see as the trends in the future? We've got the next generation of statisticians, or at least some of them here, and they would like to position themselves ideally to be on the cusp of things. So what do you think?
So I think as we get to more and more data and more sophisticated scenarios, you have like these techniques like machine learning and neural nets, and those are all important to have a grasp of this type of data mining and the techniques that are associated with that go into artificial intelligence and everything. And those become like tools in your toolkit, which are great. At the end of the day, like you're going to need to know those just like you need to know SQL. Like those are just important. But at the end of the day, what I've seen in my past 10 years or so, the candidates who have a solid grasp of formal statistics are always going to be better employees than ones who are practitioners of these newer tools. So while it's definitely good to have the grasp of all these techniques and be able to program and like it feeds into engineering, a lot of these black box, I call them, techniques are important. What you're doing right now as a stat major is key. There's too many people who just don't have the intuitive sense of what it means to think in a causal nature and to like just understand the fundamentals. That's not going to go away. No matter how much data we have, no matter like the Internet of Things and just information consuming our lives, having the grounding and the formal training is key. So you guys are in the right discipline.
Great. Okay, any other quick questions? No? All right. Well, let's thank our guest.